IVM. "39 years ago, she moved into a profession unknown. She moved beyond all clichés in the 1980s to find the right mix in stir glasses. Her passion got her to set and raise the bar for many professional women to follow. Today, we are in high spirits as we welcome India's first ever female bartender, Shatbhi Basu. In 1980s, Shatbhi created a place for herself and generations of women to pursue a career as bartenders. In 1997, Shatbhi and her spirit stirred further when she started India's first bartending academy called Stir. Shatbhi is also a beverage consultant, author, and the head of a bartending academy. She's also awarded by the President of India and the Ministry of Women and Child Development as India's first woman doing pioneering work in the field of bartending. She's also the host and content creator for India's first show on cocktails and more in high spirits on NDTV Good Times. The first American whiskey ambassador India from 2013 to 2016. I think this has been like the longest introduction I've had for a guest on my show. Welcome to Beyond Cliché. This is your host in those style, and I am super excited because I'm going to be talking to a veteran in her industry who actually wanted to be a vet. So it's quite a story. So we are here to explore that. And joining me in the studio on this show today is Shatbhi Basu. Hi, Shatbhi. How are you doing?
Hey, Almas. So good to be here with you. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it is definitely an honor and a pleasure both because, it's so revolutionary to see that there was somebody that stood up in the 1980s and said, I want to do this. This is my passion. I want to mix drinks and I'm going to learn the techniques to do it. So, Shatbhi, I was doing some research on you and I read that your first memories were with your dad serving and making drinks at home, right? So that's where it started for you, right? So did you have this passion for mixing drinks as a child? Where did it all start for you?
No, actually not at all. This was something, I was the youngest in the house and therefore, as usual, the youngest always gets roped in to help in the kitchen, help with guests. Right. And that's how I would, watch my mom and dad when we had guests at home and they entertained. And I was always roped in to help either dad or mom. Either it was, serving snacks to everyone who came. Right. Or watching my dad, get the drinks right.
Right.
And I guess later on it must have been at the back of my mind. But no, that was just something you did as a kid in the house, helped around. So that it was exciting to watch, but it definitely wasn't something that at that point of time caught my attention at all.
Yeah, because at that point in time you had this passion for animals and you definitely wanted to be a vet, right? So tell us about that.
So I had a one-track mind really, and that one track was simply to work with animals.
Right.
I guess it came about. I loved animals of all kinds, and I would be always bringing a lame pup home or whatever I found. And also, growing up, I read a lot of books on animals,
Interesting.
That is something I did. So I think that is probably what kind of got me into this whole business of wanting to tend to animals.
Right.
James Herriot, who was a vet and wrote a lot of books on his home in the Yorkshire Dales in England. I used to be glued to them, and I would literally, imagine myself there with him, wanting to, help cure animals. So I think it was just one track for me. Till, of course, after getting admission into vet college, my family doc told my parents that, they would be doing me a disservice if they allowed me to do this. Because I had so many allergies at that point of time. I was allergic to dust, allergic to smell, allergic to fur. And, it would kind of, I would break into, I would get chest congestion and I would get bronchitis and stuff like that. And so he said, she will be more ill than actually be able to do anything. You should not allow her to do this.
So this is like, destiny literally telling you that, look, we're going to lift you up from what you thought you're going to do to what you're destined to do. And that's when hotel management happened for you. And
that's when hotel
your journey started with officially entering the kitchen.
Yes, that's when it started. And then so my next focus was the kitchen, which then, became focused even more on the Chinese kitchen. So I worked a lot to get there. I practiced. I did internships in the Chinese kitchen to make sure by the time I finished college, I was ready to be absorbed into an Asian kitchen. But that didn't happen. They kind of, pushed me into the main kitchen and said that, well, do 6 months rotation, and then after that we'll put you into the Asian kitchen.
So what happened? How was the experience?
Reasonable.
How was the experience?
Which was a reasonable thing, for someone to say. And so I agreed to do that, and I worked in the main kitchen. Went through all the departments in the kitchen. It was a great experience for me. I don't think it was a great experience for the chef who was in charge of the main kitchen, though.
Why is that?
I think he kind of found me a distraction. Obviously he couldn't say things that he wanted to say when I was around. And they usually in the kitchen, they talk pretty loudly and they're quite vociferous.
Yes. So
in
fact, Shatbhi, I had a chef, a male chef in my previous episode, and he was telling me one of the reasons why women do not fit into commercial kitchens is because of the language and the whole pressure and the way people speak over there. So you're kind of saying it was the same story back then. We're talking which year, Shatbhi?
1980.
Wow. So he found you as a distraction.
But the rest of them were fine with me. The other chefs were all fine with me. I had no problem with them at all. In fact, they were extremely helpful. And it was really good. It was really good for me. I learned a lot. It's just that they refused to, transfer me into the Asian kitchen. And after about 8 months, when they refused, I thought to myself that, listen, I've wasted 8 months already. By now, if I had worked on a Chinese wok, I would have been brilliant, because then my hand would have been really, really set when I was doing it every single day.
Right.
And in those days, I was not very patient, and I was reasonably rebellious, as all young people are. And I thought, this is ridiculous. I can't waste any more time doing this. I think I need to go out and, find another job for myself. Let me get more aggressive. Instead of working in a hotel, let me just go directly to a Chinese restaurant. And, it probably is going to be easier because there's going to be less red tape there. Since there's only a chef there and there's no HR department and nonsense like that. And so that's what I did. I quit my job with the hotel. And I had a senior from college who was the manager at a really good, one of the best Chinese restaurants at that time in Bombay. I thought maybe I should, talk to him. So I went and met him and I asked him whether he would give me a job. And he said, yeah, sure, I'll give you a job, but we're going to be actually opening a branch close to where you live.
Okay.
So in the meanwhile, you can work in the town branch for a short while, and you can work. They had another outlet which was kind of an all-day cafe outlet which did shakes and salads and sandwiches. So he said 3 months you can work there, and post that, once the restaurant opens in Bandra, you can shift there. So I said, cool. And so I did that. And he said, I can't promise you the kitchen. That's the chef's decision. It's not my decision. I'm going to offer you a job in the restaurant. Post that. If the chef thinks that he wants you in his kitchen, we'll see.
Okay.
If not, you work in the restaurant. And I said, okay, I'll take a chance. I mean, I have nothing to lose. I'll still be around Chinese food, which is something that interested me. So I said, okay. So that's what I did. I joined the restaurant in Bandra. And I worked in the restaurant. And the chef, of course, didn't want me in his kitchen.
Did he also find you as a distraction and said, no, this is not working out?
No, he just thought I was too smart for my boots. He thought my interest was me overselling myself or showing off, which was so completely not the case. But, Chinese chefs, the old Chinese guys, they kind of were very self-obsessed, and they were very, they had big egos. And he just didn't want me anywhere near him.
So back then,
of course, later on that changed. No, there were. In fact, from my batch, we were about 5 of us who decided that we wanted to work in the kitchen.
Wow! And this batch is how many people?
120.
Wow! And there are 5 of you.
But the women, we were about maybe out of 120, maybe there were about maybe 50, 60 women, 50.
Okay, so it was a good ratio. Hotel management is something that women pursued, but entering the kitchen was something that not everybody wanted to do.
Exactly.
And bartending was unknown for sure.
It was unknown. It was part of food and beverage. It wasn't a specialized skill at that point of time.
Right.
At all.
Right from, men in the kitchen saying no to this woman in the kitchen, how did you land up behind the bar, Shatbhi? How did that happen?
So that was really funny, in this restaurant, we served alcohol, but we didn't really have a bar. So our bar was just a side station. It was just one of those side tables where they had made a cabinet on the wall where the bottles were displayed. And the top of the side station was the bar. So it was part of the restaurant and not a special bar at all. And my job as the restaurant supervisor was not only to take charge of staff in the restaurant for service, and offer them a little bit of training, but also to make the cocktails. So the manager said to me that the straight drinks and the beers will be picked up by the boys directly, but whenever there is an order for cocktails, you have to.
So back then, was there a profession called bartending? Was it defined the way it is defined today?
No, it wasn't. Yes, it existed, but it wasn't well defined. It was just people who were just randomly put behind the bar. Most of them were just waiters, service teams who were then just allotted and put behind the bar. There were very few people who were qualified. There was no bartending course. It was part of food and beverage or the experience you learned just working behind the bar.
Right.
So for me, it was all theoretical. I kind of understood it because I studied it as part of food and beverage. I knew some of the classic cocktails because that's what we were taught in terms of recipes, but there was no technique that was taught to us, and that was scary for me because the minute he told me that, I was thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen? And before I could even figure it out, there was an order for a cocktail, and I was shaking.
Do you remember what cocktail was that?
Yes, it was one of the most iconic and classic cocktails, which was the dry martini. And that scared me even more because, I was there taking the orders and making the drink, both. So here I was out in the restaurant and this guy says, he'd like a martini. And I asked him all the right questions because, I knew all the questions.
Right.
And he said, I'd like it extra dry. And I said, okay, cool. I was so confident when I was talking to him. Inside I was quaking because I was thinking, oh my God, I have to actually make this now. So I walked up to the bar and I found the bottle of gin and I'm looking for the bottle of dry vermouth and I couldn't find a dry vermouth anywhere.
Oh, okay.
So I went to the manager and I said, hey, there's no dry vermouth. Where do you keep it? And he says, I don't know. The guy before you made it. So I guess there must be a way of doing it, right?
Just figure it out.
And I was thinking, oh God. Yeah. So I quickly said, okay, dry vermouth. What did I learn about dry vermouth in college? And it just broke it down into dry vermouth equal to dry white wine, to which extra alcohol is added as a preservative and aromatics are added in terms of herbs and spices. And I said, okay, let me go and find out where the white wine is. So I found the bottle of cold, dry white wine. And I found another bottle which said Cinzano Aperitivo, which is very similar to Campari. So I said, okay, the aromatics are all there. So I upped my recipe from 45 ml gin to 60 ml gin. And I simply dipped my stirrer into the bottle of the Aperitivo and then put the ice in my drink. And I just stirred it with that dipped thing, hoping the aromatics would get in, as gin anyway is aromatic enough. So I simply stirred it with all that ice and I poured it into my glass. Luckily, they had olives, so I put in out. I told the waiter, I take this drink. I'm standing in the corner. If he asks you who made it, please don't say anything.
And
all I just kind of, stood in a corner, hid.
Wow. And all this is happening in a matter of minutes.
I just went into the corner. Yes.
And without any Google, without any instructions, nothing.
There's nothing. There's no Google. There's no internet. There is nothing. Only books and nothing else. And I sent it out and I just kept my fingers crossed and said, oh God, please let him not hate it and send it back. And he actually drank it and asked for another one. And I said, oh my God, I got saved. So I was saved that day, but I obviously didn't take it for granted. I actually went back and, hunted in my book trunk because I know that my mom and my aunt, when I was in final year of college, had actually given me a book on bartending. My uncle had told them that, I might find it useful. So they'd actually given it to me, but I had never looked at it, seriously. So I pulled it out and I actually read it from first page, word for word. Mm-hmm. And honestly, it's that reading of that book, which was called The Tradewick Bartender's Guide, which actually changed my life.
Wow.
And I unfortunately was never able to meet Victor Bergeron, who was also known as Tradewick. But I always, raised my glass to him and said a thank you wherever he was. Because I think, that was the book that kind of changed my life completely.
I'm sure.
Because that really taught me how to bartend. It really taught me everything I needed to know.
Lovely.
Even taught me technique, and I got it right finally.
So from self-education to setting up an academy, it's been quite a journey of almost 4 decades for Shatbhi Basu.
Yes.
We're in conversation with her, and she's just shared the story of the first ever dry martini that she made while she was hid behind that bar. We're in conversation with her, and we're going to be right back after a short break.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So it's been a great week on the network, as it almost always is. Let me give you a couple of highlights that you should definitely check out. Chiki Sarkar was on This Round's on Me with Gauri Devi Dayal. Great conversation. I think you will really enjoy that. Shlok Ramachandran of our new show, Millennial Athlete, who guested on one of our older shows, Football Shirtball. He's a big football fan in addition to being a professional athlete. So I think it's a really interesting connection. And they had a great conversation about football just generally. Nankari, our new show about Indian food, hosted by Sadaf and Archit, talk about laddus this week and basically, how awesome they are. It's Diwali week, and I think that's an apt conversation for them to have. On the Wire Talks podcast, Siddharth Bhatia has a great conversation with Dylan Mohan Gray about his work on Bad Boy Billionaire, specifically around the Vijay Mallya episode. Definitely check out the conversation if you want to know more about that. And finally, let me recommend the Edges and Sledges Cricket podcast this week. They take a look back at the IPL 2020. They go over the final, Delhi versus Mumbai, and how that played out. And they also create their dream IPL 2020 fantasy team. Do check that out. I think you'll enjoy that as well. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
Hello and welcome back to Beyond Cliché. This is Almas on your show where we talk about breaking gender stereotypes. I'm a speaker, author, coach, changemaker, and I also have a petition on change.org where I'm asking a leading diaper company to include the father's image on the diaper wrapper, basically revamp their packaging. If you believe in the cause, please go to www.change.org/PapaPampers2. I think we are in a time and space where we really need to break gender stereotypes. And talking about that, we have a very special guest in this virtual studio with me, somebody who actually, like I said at the beginning of the show, raised the bar for many women to follow. We have with us India's first female bartender, Shatbhi Basu, and we were talking about her first ever drink, the one that she made called the Dry Martini, and how she had to educate herself with no Google or YouTube at hand. From there on, she went on to start her own academy. And mind you, this is also India's first bartending academy. So Shatbhi's had quite a few firsts, right? So Shatbhi, tell us what happened. So how long did this bartending continue for you? And then you went on to doing so many things. So tell us about your journey from there.
So it continued till almost, I think, 88. It continued. At all times I did dual roles. So I never, at any point of time only worked as a bartender. I was always also in charge of the restaurant. So either I was a restaurant manager, but I also did the bar, or I was assistant food and beverage manager, but I also worked the bar with the boys. So for me, it has always been a dual role. I did both at all times. I did the bar because I loved it. I did everything else because that was my job.
So I'd like to know more about the stereotypes that you faced, Shatbhi, during this journey, because it's, with time, the bar culture also evolved. Like, I'm somebody who lived the 90s. So for us, it was the evolution of so many bars in Mumbai and so many places coming up. And yes, I do remember seeing bartenders, but I honestly don't remember seeing too many women bartenders. So what was happening in the bar culture space, and how were you placed there? What was happening with you?
So for me, I think for everyone, it was a journey of discovery.
Yes,
so in my time, there were hardly any male bartenders either. So for me, it wasn't about male, female at all at that time. That was the funny thing. It was about bartenders or no bartenders.
Right.
So even at that point of time, there were probably not even 3 or 4 serious bartenders in the country who you could actually pick up and say, okay, this person is an actual bartender. So there were very few in the country. So it wasn't even about male or female bartenders. It was just about bartenders per se. And for me, it was fabulous because I was at a time when people had no clue about great bartending skills. We didn't really have great cocktail menus. We hardly had any products available. We had almost no information. My biggest challenges were lack of information and lack of product more than anything else. And
so
lack of equipment.
The imported spirits had not started yet to that level.
Well, they were there, but they were very little, and they were restricted mainly to 5-star hotels. Standalone restaurants didn't have access to them. But the funnily enough, the positive side was that because I worked the floor as well, women found it really easy to talk to me. And they kind of opened up, and they found, and both men and women found that it was easy to be able to talk to someone who had knowledge and who was able to explain a drink to them and was able to listen to them and to understand what they wanted and then translate that into a drink. So actually it worked in my favor. For most people used to think that, woman bar, that will be a problem for you. But actually it worked exactly the opposite way for me. It worked in my favor. Women would come up to me and say, oh God, you have no idea how refreshing it is to be actually able to talk to you and tell you what we want. Guys, on the other hand, very often, if I was behind the bar, would not want to talk to me.
Were they surprised seeing you behind the bar to begin with? Like back in those days?
They used to, and they would debate to themselves, which they would later tell me, whether or not they thought they should actually give me, notice me at all, or even, kind of talk to me, or should they ignore me completely? And then after 2 drinks, when I would go up to them and ask them whether they wanted something in particular, that's when they would open up to me and said, hum log to we were thinking, why should we give you any bow at all? And then they realized that no, we didn't know how to talk to you, so we were afraid. But when you came up and you started speaking to us and, explaining what there was available, that's when they realized that, it was okay. I mean, I didn't treat them any different. And they didn't need to treat me any different from how they would talk to any other bartender.
That's very progressive, actually, yeah. Because normally
and the good thing was that they could actually have a conversation with me, which they would find very difficult to have with a normal bartender.
Interesting. So, normally when you look at alcohol, the cliche is that men are allowed to drink. You'll pick up any advertisement or any branding related to any alcohol company. They're only featuring men, right? And as if women don't drink at all, they're not allowed to drink. There's just so much cliche around it. And you've been in this business long enough. Why does this exist? What's happening in this space?
Well, I think it's our social structure that has dictated everything. And, we're always slow to show the evolution of social structure. And it's only people like us who are unafraid to go out there and do things and make that change, and say that, look, if there is a change, we're part of that change. And whether you like it or not, it's going to change and you have to accept that change. And so I think, And I think also the other part is that there is a change, the change is happening and people are happily accepting the change. But the media very often doesn't like to show that change. They still live in the same stereotypes and they ask you the same stereotypical questions. And they forget that they themselves walk out and go to bars. And sometimes it used to be very funny when most of the time the questions used to be asked by female journalists and they would ask me the same question about, do you feel safe working in a bar? And I would ask them, do you feel safe sitting in a bar? And they'd say, yeah, we do. And so if you feel safe sitting in a bar where you are surrounded by people, it's crowded, you have no control over what might happen to you. Me, on the other hand, I'm standing behind the bar. I have a huge bar counter in front of me. I'm perfectly safe. In fact, you're the one who's not safe. I'm actually safe behind a bar. So if you feel safe in a bar, then for me, I'm in the safest place in the world. And everyone forgets that people like us, we work in bars where people like you and me go.
Right. Absolutely. But
so if you trust your brother and your father, and if you respect them enough, then you know that they're not going to come to my bar and misbehave with me because it's about you and me. And therefore, it does not happen. It very rarely happens that people will put you in a place where you are uncomfortable. It very, very rarely happens.
That's very refreshing to know, Shatbhi, because, for someone who is not aware of this,
I've been there 40 years. I've been there 40 years, and I have to tell you that in the 40 years that I've worked in all kinds of situations, not just only in formal bars, I've worked at events, I've worked in the outdoor space, I've done masterclasses. I have to tell you that there may have been in 40 years, maybe only 1 or 2 incidents. And that also incidents where my team, you would come up to me and say, ma'am, I think you need to go for a walk behind somewhere while we handle this. Where somebody was not being obnoxious, but they were just slightly drunk and they wanted me to leave so that they could deal with it. But there has never been a situation where someone has actually been rude to me or has said something to me.
Or misbehaved.
And if it was, or misbehaved. And if they were rude, they were not rude because I was a woman. They were rude because they were just rude people and they would have done the same thing to a guy as well.
But you didn't have men hitting at you, saying,
not at all.
After drinking.
Not at all. If they did hit on me, it was in good faith. It was not lecherous at all. I think what happens, Almas, is your body language immediately tells them whether they can mess with you or not.
I 100%
And my
agree.
body language told them very, very clearly that I was in a position of power and knowledge. And there was no way they could mess with me. They could clearly see it. They could clearly see it and they knew that. And that is probably the reason why they never messed with me. And they also could see that the guys who were with me on the bar would not tolerate it. It's your body language that controls what happens to you. If you have good body language, it just negates everything else. It makes sure, I think the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you hold yourself there, immediately sends a message out to the people on the other side that you can't mess with this one here. They can see that you're not someone to be messed with. And because of that, they respect you. They show you the respect. They talk to you with respect and they never mess with you.
But in all honesty, Shatbhi, would it have, I'm just thinking, I'm trying to debate this whole thing out. Could it have also been because you were fairly senior in the whole journey? You were not, a 20-year-old, let's say, in a bar.
I began when I was 20, so.
Yeah, and at that point in time.
And at that point also, I didn't have that issue. So my first 10 years from 20 to 30, I had no trouble at all. Later on, it was a different issue because later on, obviously I was senior enough, but even in my early years, I didn't have an issue at all. And in fact, almost everyone that I've trained who works with me as well, that's the first lesson I gave them. Carry yourselves well. Start from a position of knowledge because when you have knowledge, it shows. And that gives you the correct body language. and never try to be one of the boys, because you're not. So hold yourself the way you are. You're a woman. Show that you're a woman, and you're a woman with knowledge, and you're a woman in power and in control of the situation. When they see how knowledgeable you are, how you carry yourself with poise, how much command you have over your team, the way you're working, by default, they know that this is not a person you want to mess with. And they have respect for you automatically. It's when you don't do that, that you lose respect. It's when you try very hard to be one of the boys and you try to act like one of the boys, that's when you lose. Because then you're not on top of your game. Your body language is wrong.
So there's a lot of psychology that goes into the way you carry yourself as a bartender, right? So it's a combination of obviously your knowledge, and knowledge comes first. Like you said, with knowledge is power. Simple as that.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And you by default, your body language changes immediately with knowledge. Because everything you do comes from knowledge. And therefore, you are more confident. And when you're confident, it just shows. Your body language shows completely differently.
So I kind of just want to understand this, because you've been in this industry not only behind the bar, but also, helping set up businesses. You ran an academy. We still don't have too many women in this space, right?
True that.
Especially behind the bar. What is the biggest challenge? And, top line, what I can think of is obviously the family is not going to be with it, right? What are some other challenges that women face, and why don't we have too many women in this business?
So obviously family is the most important thing. It's the biggest challenge, because even though we live in nuclear families, we're still joined at the hip to the extended family.
Right.
And the aunts, the grandmothers, the uncles, all of them, the first question they ask is, no, why? There's not enough awareness, there's not enough education, and obviously there's not enough women in the right kind of position, showing how skilled and how important it is. So that, of course, is the most important thing. Second, I think, sometimes I feel the industry doesn't do enough. We have a problem when it comes to the laws. Our laws say that you can't have women in the bar, behind the bar, beyond 8 o'clock at night or 9
That's
o'clock
a law?
at night.
That's an actual law?
There's an actual law. In different states, it's different. So in Maharashtra, that's the law. And they still haven't gotten rid of that. The other thing is that because of that, restaurants don't make the effort of making sure that women reach home safe at night. Now, most bars work late, right? So we finish at 1 o'clock or 1:30 in the night. How do you expect a woman, a young person, to travel alone at 1:30 at night? Because there are so few, the hospitality, the bars, they cannot afford to make sure they have a travel for women at night. Some do, some don't.
So the logistics are missing here.
Yes. So where they have a lot of women working with them, they try and do that. They try and make arrangements. But otherwise they don't. And they don't want to take the responsibility. Even though some of the women say, we'll handle it, they don't want to take that responsibility. Because if something goes wrong, the onus will be on the bar for not providing transport. So we also don't have spaces to create separate locker rooms for men and women. That again is a logistical issue. So we are trying to do that. We're working with hospitality. We're working with the industry. And they are committed to making that change. They want more women in the nightlife space. They want more women in the bar. And they want to create these spaces. But again, transport and travel is one of the biggest issues we face for women in the bar. More than anything else, I think that is the one thing that we face. And I think now we are trying very hard to create programs where we can include more women, give them enough training, show them the way, show them the ropes, and work with the hospitality to ensure that their safety, gender equality, and sensitivity training to guys when it comes to women. Because sometimes the guys feel that, women take advantage of their position and they get jobs over them and are paid more than them, even though they're not qualified enough. So we're trying to kind of create that whole sensitivity, equality training, both with hospitality, owners as well as people to ensure that the future is brighter and we see more women coming into it. Also, obviously, creating more awareness programs, educating parents, showing them that this is a very skillful job.
Yeah, this is a job that requires skills,
skills and knowledge. Right.
I love this dimension, Shatbhi, because, to someone who's a teetotaler and who's also someone who's, not been exposed to this space extensively, apart from a few visits to a few bars, what I see is there's this whole taboo, right?
Yes.
And that is why you also have a ratio disparity in the consumption of alcohol. Forget catering to the men or the women outside the bar, but it's also consumption. Has the consumption ratio evolved over a period of time? And what is the consumption now? How many women versus men turn up into a bar now?
I think in a bar now, you'll find equal amount of men and women in bars.
So then we should also have equal amount of bartenders. It's only fair to do that, isn't it?
I wish we could do that.
No, because it's a very valid point, yeah? If you're saying there's equal consumption.
But, so women are still going out to drink. They're going out, they're drinking with their husbands, they're drinking with their friends. But when it comes to their children, they're still not comfortable having their children working in bars. And I'm talking about, so imagine, I'm talking about people in my generation. They don't want their children to work in bars. So imagine that.
What's the number one excuse that you get? Like, what is that one thing that they normally tell you?
The most important thing is that what will we say when we have to get the kids married? And our mothers, our parents, their grandparents are not comfortable with the idea. Family is not comfortable with the idea. Because it's a status issue sometimes.
Yeah. And especially if you look at consumption, it is still okay to say that the man has a drinking problem or the man is drinking. Forget the problem. Okay. We are even open to accepting the problem if the man has a problem. But if the woman has even had, a drink or two, that becomes a very big issue. So there's definitely...
No, it's not anymore. It's not anymore. It's not anymore. I mean, people are drinking with... women are drinking quite openly without any problem. So I think we have reasonably evolved.
I think it depends on the strata of society that you're looking at. Yes. Depends on the cities that you're looking at.
Yes, totally. And it's evolved reasonably well, where families are perfectly happy drinking together also. It's not a problem. The problem is in families where even the men don't drink at home. That's where the problems are more. The bigger problems are where men don't drink at home. They go out and drink only. That's where the problems are the highest. But apart from that, in more nuclear families, evolved families, in mainly the metros and the mini metros also, I've seen that. So whenever I used to go and do master classes, even in the mini metros, in cities like Nagpur, Indore, Bhopal, Pune, no problem at all. There were women who would attend my master classes as well. And they would ask me questions and they're quite happy. I did one recently online for Lucknow. And they were all women who attended it. And I said, because it's the women's charter, would you like me to do non-alcoholic drinks? And they said, no, we're happy doing alcoholic drinks. So it's not that at all. I think it's changing, it's evolving. There's no issue about it at all. It's just that when it still comes to your daughter going out and becoming a bartender, you're still not sure. So we're changing that. We're trying really hard to change that. We've showcased, we've got a lot of the women who are already in. We're trying to upgrade them. We're trying to showcase them, show how good they are and how well they're doing. And it's going to take time. It took a long time for women to come into the kitchen. It will take longer to showcase women in the bar.
I absolutely
People are now accepting women in the kitchen. And you have a lot of women chefs now who are doing really well.
Right. Right. I kind of absolutely agree. And I think
yes,
advertising products, FMCG space has a lot of work to do here, because if you're going to showcase only men, then, we definitely have a long way to go. But, there are people like you that are sort of saying that we're going to shackle this whole thing up and we're going to break this and stir this up. So stirring reminds me of your academy. So India's first bartending academy. How did that happen?
Well, I suddenly woke up one day to realize that after so many years since I started, there was still no school of bartending. When I needed one, it wasn't there. I couldn't afford to go outside the country and learn bartending in another country. So I had to teach myself. And I realized that 18 years later, it was still the same. There was still no academy. And the only teaching was happening at Institute of Hotel Management. But they were again doing exactly what they did when I was in college, which is giving them a broad spectrum of knowledge, but no technical skills.
So there was no specialized course, I'm assuming. It must have been a part of a larger curriculum.
It's part of larger curriculum. So I thought to myself that if after so long people are still not doing it, then maybe, I should do it. Because there has to be a start somewhere. Someone has to begin doing it. And that's how I began. I started with doing a 3-day seminar and a conference on bartending and mixology, which then graduated into an actual school. I wanted to see whether there really was a vacuum the way I saw it. And there was. And that's how I started the school. It took me a while to try and come up with the curriculum because the Western curriculum would not work for us. Because in the West, they assumed that people already knew what it was all about because people, they had a more equal status. So even if you wanted to be a bartender, you still had the capacity to go to a bar and drink. And therefore learn at least the basics, and they knew all of it. Whereas we didn't have that. That equality didn't exist in our society.
You're talking about economic equality.
Yes. Therefore, our curriculum was completely different from anywhere in the world. We had to start from scratch. I had to assume that people didn't know anything and begin from there.
About drinking, right.
Yes. About drinking, about spirits, about the categories of spirits, about the basics of cocktails. A bartender there, even if he wasn't a bartender, even if he was a plumber, would go out and drink at a bar and would have a drink and would have a cocktail, and he knew what it was. Whereas here it was completely the opposite. They didn't even know what the basics of spirits were. So we had to create a course which was from scratch. So it was a learning process for me as well, but it evolved. We did that, and we did a good job of it. And we then, we then trained people in it. And our first batch went out in the year 2000. And it was great because, people in the bar industry, in the restaurant industry appreciated the fact that they had someone who came with knowledge to them. And it was a good thing for both them as well as the bartenders. And we were able to then give them that position of bartender. Earlier, they didn't even have a position called bartender. They were just taken as waiters. But they were put behind the bar. And we insisted that they were given the designation of bartender and not waiter. So it was a great change. It was a great change. We had to bring about that change. And we said that unless you give them designation of bartender, they won't join work. They will not join work as a waiter. So we made sure that designation was created both in restaurants and in hotels. And we insisted upon it. And that's how it worked. And they were paid really a pittance at that time. And we insisted that if they came with certification, they had to join at a minimum package. Without that, they would not. Below that, they would not join. So we created that for them. And we created that sense of respect for someone who had skills. And I think that was the beginning. In the year 2000 was the beginning when they finally saw that there was a change happening. And it just grew from there.
So you've been involved also in placing your students.
Yes.
How easy or difficult has it been to place women students, girls?
Actually, it's very easy to place women students because there are so few. And we still get very few women who come and study with us, even now. But it's very easy to place them because a lot of bars want women bartenders. So even if they don't work late nights, in very often...
so now the situation has changed. So a lot of bars actually want women bartenders.
Yes.
And why is that, Shatbhi?
because of that hoo-ha that happened when Delhi changed their law. And they don't understand, very often, most of them don't understand that the law had changed only in Delhi. It hadn't changed in India. So it became very, and we kept telling them that, okay, now the law has changed, so we want more women bartenders. And I kept telling them that there aren't any women bartenders. Just because the law changes, that doesn't change. You think that people weren't in the space because of the law? I didn't even know a law existed and I worked in
Exactly. I kind of got to know about it now.
Exactly. So it wasn't the law. It had nothing to do with the law. It was our social structure. And that hadn't changed because the law changed. And the law had changed only in Delhi, which is the most unsafe place in the world. But in Bombay, where we found it really safe to even travel at night, we had a law which says that we can't work in the bar at night. And the law still exists. They haven't changed it yet. So we're trying to do all this. We're trying to change laws. We're trying to get people to see that they cannot have a law like that. It has to change. We have to be taken seriously as a skilled profession. And all that has to change, and it'll happen. I'm sure it'll happen. We have a few young women who are coming together to make that change, and it will happen over a period of time. I'm certain of it.
I'm certain too, looking at your journey and the confidence that you carry. What I'm taking away, Shatbhi, from this conversation is that bartending is a skilled profession and we better look at it that way. I think the whole narrative needs to change because the problem is in the way it is portrayed. And if that can change, a lot can change. And you're just an example of that. What an inspiring conversation. So if there is a woman sitting, somewhere listening to this conversation who's aspiring to be a bartender, what would be your message to her?
If you have the passion for it, go ahead and do it. Remember that don't try and do this because you want to do something different. Do it because you love it. Do it because you have a passion for beverages. You have a passion for bartending. You have a passion for understanding what goes behind a bottle, what goes into a drink, about flavors, about history, about culture, about heritage, because it's a science, it's an art, it's a skill, it's about psychology, it's about so many different things.
I'm just thinking, Shatbhi, this is like
mixologist or a bartender.
This is like, being a chef in many ways. Just like you can't just get up and start cooking. You need to know some science behind it to be a good chef. This is just beverages. That's the difference.
So that's how I perceived myself when I shifted from the kitchen to the bar. I told myself, all your science is going to work here as well. You've just shifted from working with solid ingredients to liquid ingredients. Wow. You work in air-conditioned atmosphere, which is better than what you have done in the kitchen. You have nicer people to work with, and you actually have music in the background. I mean, what more do you want?
You're chilling and working at the same time.
You can actually see the customer's face, the client's face, when you give them your drink, and you know whether you've got it right or wrong. If you were in the kitchen, you'd never know that. We had the ability to see the face, to know whether you had done something right or wrong, and the ability to go and change it. If you thought that there was something wrong and you didn't see that smile of happiness, you could actually walk up and say, okay, what's wrong with it? What can I do to make it better? And change it and give it back to them, which is incredible. I mean, what more could one ask for?
Wow.
So for me, it was, it was that 1 minute, 1 second change which says, wow, okay, it's okay that I don't work in a kitchen. I'm happy to be working in the bar.
Lovely,
so that was a good thing. Yeah, that
lovely.
Was a
in
good
fact,
thing.
I'm thinking some techniques could be even more complicated than working in the kitchen at times.
Yeah.
You get one or two drops wrong and your drink is gone for a toss. So you're definitely talking skills here. Shatbhi, it's been a lovely conversation. I actually never anticipated this conversation to go in this direction, where we've spoken about skills, we've spoken about knowledge, and we've spoken about knowledge being power for a woman who's actually decided to pursue this because she has the passion to do it. So thank you so much for joining us, Shatbhi, and I wish you luck. I'm sure you have a long journey ahead to bring about that change. You're a change maker for me in many ways. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Almas. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. For the listeners who've enjoyed this show, please do, subscribe to the show. Please download it on IVM Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Every Thursday, I bring you a new guest who's broken a gender stereotype. Also, do not forget to sign my petition. Please go to www.change.org/Papa Pampers to Daddies. If you've been changing diapers, you definitely deserve to be represented more. Please go sign the petition. And women, if you want your husbands to participate in this activity, you want a larger narrative change, please sign the petition. I'll see you with another guest next Thursday, only on Beyond Cliché. Take care. Bye-bye. Ta-da.
How aware do you think you are of your laws and rights? Do you look up to laws when you are caught up in situations? Do you know what your rights are when you're stuck somewhere bad? Well, here's a show that can help you move an inch closer to being aware of what your rights are. Tune into Know Your Qanoon with me, Amber Rana. This is a podcast meant to answer all your law-related queries. Catch Know Your Qanoon every week on the IVM website or the app or anywhere you get your podcast from.
Advertising is dead. Yep, you heard me right. Advertising is dead. We're all in the content business now. Let's not call it news, TV, radio, etc., etc. It's all content, and we're in the middle of this weirdly exciting phase where all the borders and lines that have been drawn over decades has been swept away by this lovely thing called the internet. We're a show where we don't dwell on just the stuff that is now, but rather the wider stuff about advertising, media, content, and the whole goddamn circus surrounding it. Tune in every Tuesday for our weekly unboxing of the mystery box we used to call advertising. I'm Varun Dugirala, co-founder and content chief at The Glitch, and this is my new podcast, Advertising is Dead.